My Lords, we have waited some time for this bill, and I actually have my speech from the EU withdrawal bill, in which, of course, the government tried to dump animal sentience, and many of us tried to bring it back into the bill. I suggested then that the reason that they were dumping this and other aspects of the EU law, which they had promised to bring over in its entirety, was that they wanted to use Brexit as an excuse to dump a whole set of existing EU rules that promoted social justice and environmental protections. Well, how prescient of me. We all know that the EU's Animal Sentience Protocol changed the way that animals were treated across the continent. And 20 years ago, Britain used its presidency of the EU to ensure that animals were treated as sentient beings and not just as agricultural goods. And future legislation had to take account of animal well-being. Ministers had to pay full regard. And what actually happened with the amendments in the other place, the amendment which was put by Caroline Lucas MP, the government scraped a 13-vote majority because the minister at the time, I think it was Michael Gove, actually told the House that the Animal Sentience Protocol was already UK law. There was a huge backlash on social media, people correcting that statement. And of course, then the government promised to put something in another bill, and they've tried various times and it's always been totally inadequate. Now, the Noble Lord the Minister in his opening remarks said that this was a robust bill. It is not a robust bill. He also said things like, it is targeted and proportionate. It is not proportionate. And he also said, this bill honours the government's commitments. No, it doesn't. It absolutely does not, I'm afraid. And it does worry me that the government makes so many promises and then fails to deliver. And I think that is very poor government. This bill is actually the government pretending to do something about animal sentience because it knows the general public really cares. It's a PR exercise, and it is not going to prove adequate for the situation that we face. Essentially, the government is hiving off its responsibility on animals to a committee. Now, sometimes that's not a bad thing because, of course, ministers can't be up on every single issue, and having a committee of experts is an excellent thing. But if you have that committee of experts, you have to listen to them. And what happened yesterday in the climate change statutory instrument that some of us debated, a minister explained all the reasons why the government was simply ignoring the Committee on Climate Change. The Committee on Climate Change had made a recommendation and the government went against it because it said it had its own judgment or whatever. So instead of stopping using carbon credits to make up for domestic failures to reduce CO2, which the Committee on Climate Change has suggested was the only way forward, the government wimped out of serious action on the climate emergency and signed up to spew an extra 500 million tonnes of carbon into our damaged and delicate atmosphere. And in a way, this bill is doing the same sort of thing. That incident proves the inherent intentional weakness of these advisory committees. No matter how well-meaning, how well-resourced, how hard-working the committee is, the government can simply ignore them and do their own thing. Just as they did with climate change and carbon credits, they can do with animal welfare and animal sentience. And so there's a lot that needs to be improved in this bill, but it almost feels like wasted effort because I know that the whole premise of the bill is designed to make it completely ineffective. And I do feel that this is reflected in the long title of the bill, which seems designed to frame the scope of the bill so tightly around the Animal Sentience Committee that it wouldn't be possible to table amendments that aren't focused on the committee itself. This will make it very difficult, if not impossible, to place any serious duties on the government beyond the existing ones in the bill, which in practice will be little more than listing the reasons they are ignoring the committee. I would argue that, of course, cephalopods and decapod crustaceans should definitely be included in the definition of sentient animals. And I've got to say, after 4 years of waiting for this, and many, many members of your Lordship's House urging that there should not be a gap, but there has been, the government finally publishes a bill that is not, if one graded it, it would get an F for fail. It's a disaster waiting to happen.